This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks and welcome to another great podcast. Man, I'm excited to have some terrific old friends in the studio with me today, and one of them on the phone. So let's get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, in the audience, originally out of San Francisco, a terrific stand-up comic, we have Tony Camin in the house. Yeah, okay, that's enough of that. And one of the Laughs Unlimited family. She actually got her start in Sacramento, working for me as a MC and working all the shows, worked her way up to being a tremendous comic, and now she's quite the famous comedy writer of television. It's Karen Anderson. That's enough of that. And joining us all the way from Australia on the phone, this guy got his start in the Bay Area, by my memory, and ended up being a huge comic in the U.S., but for all of his success in the United States, he is a comedy god in Australia, and we have him on the phone from Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, Arj Barker. Oh, man, it's so great we haven't seen each other in a long time. The three of us, it's been over 20 years. And I just want to say thank you for getting together and doing this. As I mentioned previously, this comedy roundtable is, we all kind of shared an experience, and that is the wave that comedy took as an art form in the 80s and really went on from there. Let's just real quick for the podcast audience. Arj, why don't you tell them how you kind of got started? How did you fall into stand-up comedy?
Oh, well, I was just, I wasn't doing that much. I didn't really have much promising college career ahead of me after high school. And I was mostly into snowboarding, and that didn't seem to, there was not much of a future there. But I don't know. My friend Doug, he just said, dude, why don't you try stand-up? Because it was all over the TV, like Evening at the Improv. Every night. Yeah. It was so much, and we all assumed that those guys were all kind of getting rich because they were on TV. And so it seemed like this mecca. In reality, I know now they were getting $2,000 or whatever to do that. But I don't know. A friend just said, you're a pretty funny guy, you should try it. And then he kept kind of nudging me. And
what year was that, Arj?
That was 90. I'm so bad with timelines, but I think that was 89 I graduated. So it was about 90 when I did my first set at the Holy City Zoo.
Oh, wow. That's a great place to have a first set. I mean, so many big names came out of the Holy City Zoo that to get your start on stage there, I'm sure you had a chance to work with some people that helped direct you in the industry.
Well, for sure. But actually, my first week at a comedy club was at your club, Citrus Heights.
Ah, see, so Laughs Unlimited gave you a foothold in the industry as a paid professional.
Absolutely. It was after the 92 Laughs Unlimited comedy contest. Mike Uriga won, and Mitch Hedberg came in second, and I came in third. Oh, how funny. Well, your memory is better than mine, but that's a terrific way to start off your career. And Laughs Unlimited, not to shine my own button, was an A-room and was a great place to get started. And speaking of that, Karen Anderson came along and was part of the Laughs Unlimited family in the 80s and started off as a MC for me and did some opening sets and was growing her career. Now that's how I remember it. Karen, how did you fall into comedy?
Well, not to shine my own button, but I was just, I had a back brace and some headgear, and I talked about it a little bit. And same thing. Someone said you should just do stand up, and we go to this. Oh, actually, the first time I did it was the junior San Francisco comedy competition because I was 17.
Yeah.
So, wow. Yeah, and it was I don't know if you remember these guys. It was Rodney Sheriff from Rodney Sheriff, Mike Bozier, I think, Debbie Durst, Will Durst.
Right.
And they were the judges and they put this thing on and in San Rafael, Arj.
Wow. And do you remember the venue?
It was it's like a big theater there on 5th or 4th. or you know that big theater? It's like a Victorian house.
Not really. I mean, the Centerville movie theater. That's the only one.
It's
I know.
right. It's up on the other street behind that, and it's like this really old Victorian theater.
Now, Karen, what year was that?
That was 81. I mean, I was 17. Yeah.
Early on. Now, when did you start working for me or hanging out at the club?
So then I started going to. Well, then by the time I got to your place, it was like, I don't know. I want to say like 85, maybe 86, something like that.
Yeah, don't look
maybe,
at me. I have no
maybe
memory.
more. But because when I started going, I went to San Francisco State in 85 because I, did like junior college
school.
And then I went there, and then that's when I went to junior college. I mean, when I went to San Francisco State in 85, I started going to the Holy City Zoo, and I was a janitor there.
No way.
Yeah.
You were the janitor at the zoo?
Yeah,
I never even knew that.
Yeah, after my classes, I would go because I wanted to just hang out there. I just loved comedy so much. So then I would go upstairs to that little room that was up there, the little office, and I'd go through the Rolodex thinking, "Oh, I can use these numbers someday."
As connections. Here's Perry Kurtz.
It was like Eddie Murphy's manager.
I bet you didn't like. Hey, Karen, I bet you didn't like when Jimmy Gunn showed up to do a set, huh? He was staying late that night.
Yeah. Did he go? Did he?
Myron the Moron with the.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
There was some messy acts during those times. Messy acts.
But during that time is when I met all the comedians, and then we'd all go up to your place, and you gave us tons of stage time. Like I mean, Arj and Tony and I and Bob. I mean, we worked there a million times.
Yeah, and they were great. They were good rooms. That your main Laughs Unlimited room, legendary. The way it's raked up slowly, and right. Can't beat it.
The Firehouse Alley room.
Yeah.
And we should explain, she mentioned Bob. Bob Worley is here holding the phone for Arj Barker, so thank you,
and
Bob.
that's a saying, holding the phone, but he's literally holding He's holding the phone.
I'm cramping.
You should
Can
be
you
able
put
to
it on
talk.
a book or something? Or
No, just,
Anyway, so Tony, what year and what kind of got you, what point did you feel like, hey, I could be a comic?
I was at a KFJC, it was a college radio station, and Kevin Kataoka also worked there. He was, and his friend Don Perazzo, and those guys were funny. And like, oh, there's this Holy City Zoo. You should try Tuesday nights or whatever. So I did it. It was fun. So those guys, Kevin got me into it. Through that radio station. So you think I know how to use a microphone. And then same situation as Karen. I think you saw me at the Improv, had a Monday night showcase, and you'd come down, check out the local scene, pick the best, and bring them up north.
Yeah, no, I would make regular trips to L.A. and San Francisco, and San Francisco being much closer, I was there more often, but I got a chance to check out talent, and then, as been said a couple times on this podcast, Sacramento was kind of stuck with my sense of humor. If I thought somebody had promise and were working at the craft, I would offer them stage time because that's how you improved. And just to sidetrack, I looked at Laughs Unlimited, even though it was considered an A-room, as the university training for the guys that had a shot at the golden ticket, which is my way of saying getting a sitcom, doing the talk shows, or getting into a movie or something. As I said many times, I was on the fringe of show business, which is as close as you can get in Sacramento.
Yeah.
But we had a place in the industry. We were able to find young talent like you three and help develop and give you the stage time for you to develop.
And we didn't need money back then.
Or receive it. But the nuggets were good, and
we had a place to stay.
What was in the not so macho macho?
The not so macho nachos.
Still a secret to this day.
Yeah. Well, the secret was getting it so the cheese would coagulate and become a brick, so nobody could eat it. If you remember. But we took that responsibility seriously, and I did search the other clubs to try to find talent like yourselves. And by the way, we should say that everybody at this table ended up having a great career based on their choice of art form, stand-up comedy, and we're part of that wave of success of comedy. But you all went different directions. And before we get to that, though, we're all I wasn't, but you guys were tremendous road talent. You did a lot of road comedy. Anything really good or bad that you...
Wait. Sorry to interrupt, Scott. Did you say everyone had great careers? Tony, did something happen?
Ouch. Well, that's what friends are for.
That's a good one, Arj.
Don't forget, Arj, I told him at the punchline he's the funniest person I ever met.
That's true.
I got in trouble for that one.
Well, let's start with you, Arj. I mean, any real success stories or horrible times on the road that have shaped your career?
At least I didn't have to leave the country.
Yeah, I mean, everything for me was it took a while to get some traction, but really what happened was I just loved working. So I never thought of, I would never was thinking in terms of success too much. There were times when I thought, oh, it'd be nice to be, getting paid, but I was so happy to just be out working and just on the road as much as I could. So I initially started on the West Coast, dipped into the Southwest a little bit, whatever clubs would book me, but then I went over to the UK. Harmon Leon told me there's stand-up in the UK. And,
really?
And I immediately sent tapes the next day. I was excited. I just loved the thought of traveling and roading it. I just wanted to just work. And so luckily I had so much what's the word?
Compulsion to get on stage?
Yeah, initiative to just get out and do sets. That
You had a fire in your belly?
I had a fire in it was a little lower than my belly.
A wanderlust.
A wanderlust.
I really think, honestly, because I was this is getting pretty Freudian, but I was so unsuccessful with girls in high school. Once I was a stand-up, I was like, wow, now I have a new power and I can meet girls or whatever. And I think that sort of motivated me in a way to stay on the road, because it was like I was out there trying to,
So for the audience not paying attention, we're talking about sex. So that was a driving factor for Arj Barker. But you didn't have any.
It made me want to be the best stand-up I could, and I love doing stand-up, but I admit that was a motivator, and that sort of pushed me along.
And you guys, this has a habit. Arj recently got married, you guys.
Woo! That's incredible.
But also, Arj.
Good one.
And he just recently got divorced.
Oh, sorry, Arj.
Oh, wait a minute.
But Arj, you the whole time, all the girls liked you, but you always had that girlfriend back in like San Anselmo or wherever you're from, Fairfax. Remember?
Well, I don't know. Initially, I did.
Sarah?
Sarah, yeah, you pined for her.
For the first couple of years, yeah, I had a girlfriend, and
It seemed like for a long time.
And funnily enough, that was the most serious girlfriend I would have for the next 20 years. And then,
well, it's interesting, but what you're saying is that other than your drive for sex and maybe potential fame, there weren't any road stories that maybe made you rethink your career choice or spring-loaded you towards your success in the business. It was all just a work in progress?
The harmonica.
I didn't have a plan B. I just kept taking gigs and doing stand-up, and I did love traveling, and I loved the idea of going to different countries. So when I got invited to Australia, I jumped on that. And then really, I can make this pretty short, but when I first came to Australia, there weren't that many overseas comedians visiting here. So immediately, there were a few, like Rich Hall had been out here and a handful of guys, but
Sniglets.
But nothing like these days where everything's much more global. But it's pretty much pre-internet or pre-YouTube, and it was pretty easy to bag some good TV spots because they thought, oh, this guy must be like a big deal, even though I really wasn't. I had a couple TV credits, but I wasn't like. Yeah,
but they were saying that here's a guy from the U.S. If he's coming to Australia, he must have some legs in this industry and some talent.
I think they thought I was bigger than what I really was, or whatever. I mean, I was I'm a decent stand-up. It wasn't all just like hype, but anyway, I got spots on like the equivalent of the Tonight Show here, and there was only 5. Again, that was pre-cable, pre-internet, so basically a lot of people saw that and immediately put butts in seats and started me off here. Really.
Yeah, but I think that's
right out of the gate.
Great story, and actually moving to Australia probably gave you a leg up that would have been a lot harder to get here in the U.S. And what a wise move to make that choice. Now, Karen...
Well, it was never... Oh. I was just bouncing around at that point. I didn't move for another. I didn't even really even half live here for another 10 years after that. I would just keep coming and going and trying to work.
Yeah, but it's the same
markets,
idea as me as a producer would bring back Gary Shandling or Seinfeld. Not once a year. I would bring them back every 3 months because I was building an audience for that act, which made it easier for me to get butts in the seats because they were seeing somebody I knew that could become a draw. And this was before they were famous. But, it's the same idea. You planted the seeds of your success in those early days and are reaping from that now. Karen, when you were out on the road, did you have any aha moments that took your career a certain way, or any scary times that you'd like to share?
Well, I mean, there was I ultimately I didn't do stand up for as long as like these guys. I mean, but when I was out,
pivot.
Yeah, congratulations. I just think of like weird gigs that I did. There was always like some kind of weird thing. Like, one time I show up at this place and, it was like the hotel was around the theater of the place. And, so they're like, oh, we haven't really redone the rooms yet, So then I get in there and it's completely ruined. Like it's not livable in there. There's literally a bird in a nest on the bed.
No.
With a hole in the ceiling up above.
And that was where they expected you to
they're like,
stay?
this is your room. I had a key to it, And it was like, what?
Like they're protecting it.
I was just like, everybody was like, you guys are out of your fucking minds, It's like, are you serious? Like, oh, we didn't know about that, And anyway, so there was like stuff like that, or doing like stand up at an old person's, at a hospital for
right.
And so we start to do the show, and they had a mic and then a little tiny amp that goes next to you,
right?
And so we do the whole set. I think Laurie Kilmartin was there too, and then at the end, the other side of the room goes, we didn't hear you. Can you come back here and do it now? and we did.
Oh, that's funny.
We did the whole show.
That was very gracious of you.
Yeah, we just, what else are we going to, Yeah. I mean, I just love doing it all the time. Like, all right, we'd travel anywhere to go do stand up, And it was like for nothing, we'd do it for nothing.
Wasn't that part of the, what? That's like the joy. Like Tony and I had done some long ass tours, like the Northwest, like driving hours to play like a rough bar. But when I look back now, like those are still like some of my favorite memories of my whole life. Like like we call them broke dick tours, but
yeah,
just like
you don't get tons of money, but a good experience, or there be in nature, or like the YMCA camp or something.
YMCA camp. We never made money really then, but
some of us still haven't.
But we made enough money to pay like our rent, We did. We actually made enough money to live,
Right. It was one of those week to week, paycheck to paycheck kind of jobs, and there was times that you didn't get paid or
Laughs Unlimited. We always got paid from you. I always heard things, but I always did. My checks always cashed, I believe.
Yeah. Well, there was challenges from time to time, but that's not where we're going, Tony. So
that's called a pivot.
Yeah, as a road comic, Arj alluded to some adventures in the Northwest. Was there anything on the road, any stories that directed your career, pro or con, that you remember fondly or scarily?
I guess after people moving to all the San Francisco guys who started moving to Los Angeles, just starting doing that and then getting into writing a little bit. So I don't think it was specific, just like you said, different waves of people. Starting like Karen got into writing, people got into writing. If you weren't like a huge headliner, you could pivot to writing. So I sort of did that for a while, and then the Marijuana Logues had a lot of. I was in the Marijuana Logues with Arj, and that had a lot of funny stuff. Like one time, I don't think Arj was at this show. One time we did a show in Humboldt County where we take a break between the stand-up part and it was a Marijuana Logues, and then none of the crowd had come back. So we come out and it's like classical music and it's dark, and we come out and the lights go up and there's just 0 people in the audience.
Yeah, that would be a little shocking.
Because it's like a community-run theater. The guys, everyone's just volunteers. They don't give a shit. It's like, so stuff like that, just general.
It's a great gig.
Yeah.
Just general stories like that. Where you're just like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, we should say that Arj Barker and Tony Camin had a lot of success with the Marijuana Logues, which was more of a theater show, though. It wasn't set in a stand-up club, although you may have performed it in that. But isn't it more of a theater piece?
Well, it was just a spoof on the Vagina Monologues.
But did you play in?
We played
theaters?
comedy clubs. We played.
Oh, you
theaters.
did?
Yeah, it's
You had an off-Broadway.
It's a reading, so it fits both. It was it's just jokes the whole time. So.
But you
What
had,
about that shower? We did a set in the shower of like a gay nightclub in New York.
We did a teaser when we were coming to off Broadway. You do all these shows. You do like 5 minutes segment or 10 minutes.
Right.
Like a TV spot.
Like a promo, right.
Yeah, a little promo spot. And we had these promo people. And we got this gay shower club, and we were standing underneath these showers, and I think I lost my phone there, and I had to go back there.
don't drop your phone.
Yeah, don't bend over.
During noon, it was just like, oh, geez, it was weird.
Yeah, those moments can be embarrassing. I once got lost driving around San Francisco, and we were in the Tenderloin, and I had to ask directions, and I go in, and I walk into this bar, and everybody's clad in leather and chaps, and I, kind of got a startled look, and then
So you fit right in, right?
Yeah. They looked down, saw your cowboy boots, got all excited.
Yeah. So I was brave and went and asked the bartender, and he kind of chuckled and gave me directions. As I left, the name of the club was the End Up Club.
Oh yeah, I think that's still there.
And I was clueless. I had not noticed the sign going in. Well, but being on the road is not only a learning process for stand-up comedy, but it helps you develop as an act and helps you develop your material. But it has to start from somewhere. Let's go back to you, Arj. Was there anybody in the industry that you were looking up to or admired in comedy that kind of encouraged you?
Well, that's funnily enough, Tony. When I started, he'd been at it longer, and I looked at
Not much.
I looked at Tony as like one of the established comedians, and one day he came up to me after a set after the Holy City Zoo, and he's like, "Hey, you're pretty funny," or something like that. And because of his persona as kind of a smartass, I was like, thanks. And I thought he was being sarcastic and being a dick.
Well, Tony, I never looked at you as a mentor. What a special moment for you. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember because he was funny, but he was real slow, took his time, and everybody's like tries when they're new, they're kind of fast and nervous. I'm like, this guy's pretty comfortable, and he's really slow and funny.
So he had some early confidence.
Yeah, you were kind of confident early, weren't you?
I don't know. I mean, I can't recall feeling that confident, but I definitely it was such a rush. I think it hooked me pretty fast, the adrenaline. And
it was just a little different. Just a little different.
Arj will just talk to you, like he's doing now. He hasn't done it yet, which I'm surprised. But all of a sudden, you'll realize he's not talking to you. He's trying out a bit. Like he does.
Yeah, he'll slip in. He'll slip in.
More than I think I know any other person who does that. Like
my dentist
Karen,
does that.
Oh, Dr. Tavitian?
Karen, just so you know, I'm not in a very joking mood because a dear friend of mine passed away just the other
here
day.
we go.
So.
Okay. All right.
Oh, sorry. We'll skip right over it, Arj. I'm sorry.
No. What happened?
He went to a spa and one of these high-end spas and got a massage.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, he didn't drink lots of water afterwards, so he didn't make it.
Oh,
is that right?
That's horrible.
What happened?
I don't know. That's a new one I'm working on.
It's a setup looking for a punchline.
They always go, drink lots of water.
Yeah, they say that. Drink lots of water. I remember Ella goes, every time, Ella DeGeneres goes, every time I get a massage, they always say, drink lots of water and take care. She always goes, I always just kick the door shut, light up a cigarette and pour a glass. It always cracked me up because that's what you want to do immediately afterwards.
Well, the ironic part is the guy worked for Alhambra Water. Boom. There you go. But Karen, you're now a very successful comedy writer, done lots of television. But in your stand-up days, were there any comedians or comics that you admired? Now, Arj mentioned Tony. Now, normally people will mention
good comics.
Well, no, but bigger names, Robin Williams or somebody of that ilk. Was there anybody that you admired or got to work with that had an effect on you? Or it was Tony. Maybe it was Tony.
She started way before.
No, I did not. I would say, I loved all the San Francisco comedians, so I like Jeremy Kramer, he would crack me up to
that guy's
no
one of
end.
the funniest.
Bob
Rubin.
You had an eclectic taste then, because Jeremy is not your normal
No.
setup
The people
punchline
that I
guy.
liked were definitely Paula Poundstone. I loved her. Watching we were talking about Evening at the Improv, just really weird sets by Michael Keaton when he was just barely doing stand up at all. I mean, when he first started and he'd read a comic, read the back of a Bazooka Joe comic, that kind of stuff I just loved that.
Yeah, well, that's different
Jake
though.
Johansson.
I mean, so there wasn't a particular person. It was watching the more esoteric comics and how they. Somebody earlier mentioned Emo Phillips, and there was some comics that do a different style to present their comedy.
Jane Dornacher, I remember watching her in San Francisco.
She was great.
Yeah, I mean, I liked all that kind of stuff. I liked that kind of I still do. I like to watch just people maybe you didn't hear of them.
Right. But then a little bit edgier, a little bit more esoteric, a little different view. I mean, Jeremy Kramer's a great example. Andy Kindler's another guy that comes at comedy a different place.
You were a big Andy Kindler supporter pretty early on, right?
Oh yeah. No, Andy worked for us a lot, and we used to love him. Now,
I love Andy.
Tony, was there anybody in the business that you got to work with or looked up to and you can say Arj.
Well, he was a wallpaperer at that time, and he did our house, and it was such a funny job. I'm like, this guy.
Arj Barker, the wallpaper guy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, now he just does it for a hobby, but he's good at it. He doesn't like to talk about it, but he's real good at it. My company hired Jake Johansson for our Christmas party, and he was like, you should give it a try. I was thinking about it, and you're a funny guy. So I'd say Jake Johansson, and then I really liked he was smart and different people like that. Jeremy Kramer, Bob Rubin. Mm-hmm. Greg Proops, I thought was really quick and funny,
So I think that's fascinating because you're a different generation, and you're mentioning people that are much newer to the industry. Because I had a chance to do this kind of roundtable with Bruce Baum, who's older than all of us, but he was getting his influence by the comics of the '70s. And in the albums that Cosby and some of the early comedy albums that had an influence on him. And in your generation, it was actual comics that were the earlier part of that stand-up wave, really. So the guy's really not a generation ahead of you, but maybe 5 years ahead of you.
Yeah, just the people I was seeing and
Yeah, but we were all into comedy records,
Yeah. I like Bob Newhart.
Oh, Bob Newhart.
You could see a lineage from Jake Johansson to Bob Newhart, the stammering and the smart and the slowness, Oh
yeah, I had a huge collection still of comedy records,
Yeah.
I know.
You what, Arj?
He does.
I don't actually never listen. I mean, when I was a little kid, my older cousin made me listen to a Stephen Martin record. I still remember that.
Did you call him Stephen Martin?
Yeah, that's how much he hates comedy records.
Steve Martin, and I was watching Delirious also when I was probably 13 or something. That blew my mind. But other than that, I didn't really listen to stand-up comedy albums much or ever have any.
Well, I was just pointing out that generationally in the industry, I'm sure it's the same in acting. There's somebody that's taken up acting since 2020 is going to have different people that they look to than somebody that was taking up acting in the 80s. I mean, it is kind of generational, but I found it fascinating that you guys went a whole different direction from the people that I interviewed earlier, and it's an age thing. I think it's people that started earlier. But let's take it to the next level. Is there anything? We'll go back to you, Arj. You're in the first position here in the room. Is there anything that you know now about being a stand-up comic you wish you knew when you got started? I mean, is there any one little piece of information or gem of knowledge that you wish you had in the 80s or 90s?
Well, it's a simple thing, and I do get occasionally emails from guys, and they go, "What advice can you give me?" And the two main advices I give are, and this is kind of obvious, I didn't invent this, but don't worry about failing. Every time you bomb, it doesn't matter because you get more information from that than you do by even having a good set. That's the advice I give for comics trying to learn how to do it. But the other thing is more philosophical, as I say. Don't worry about don't think about. So some guys I meet, you run into they're so hungry, right? They're trying to schmooze. They're so worried about getting paid. but it's like you should. Those first years of like open mics with your friends are like so precious, and like I just tell them, it's not going to ever get necessarily more fun than what you have now. You know, it's right. You already have what you're looking for. So I go kind of zen on them a little bit.
Well, it is, there's a different way to look at it. There's the business side of entertainment and being in the comedy business, but there's also the reason that people like you guys start, and that's really a love for the art form. It's not, you don't go into it thinking about the money and the fame and the fortune. I mean, you might dream about it, but that's not what drives you to get on stage. What drives you to get on stage is to get the love from the audience and to interact with the audience and engage with them. And I think you make a good point. I'm an entrepreneur. I've started lots of companies, and I tell other entrepreneurs, failures are the stepping stones to success, which is a quote from Emmett Stone. But the truth is also not just in business, but also in entertainment, especially stand-up comedy, that even bombing, you're going to learn something. And I think that if you're sharing that, Arj, to young comics, you're giving them good advice. So I think that's important, and I think it's good you do that.
Oh, well,
You're a good boy, Arj.
Also, I think one thing that separates Arj and Karen is I think that also, like, I could have been better about is, like, writing a lot. Arj is always, like, writing, like moving forward and not too, like, it's definitely self-reflective, but also like, well, let's just write more jokes. I think that's a good attitude to have.
Well, yeah, it is. Staying writing, I think, is a key to the things that I think are important that are in my book is that you have to be consistent. And like Arj says, you can't be afraid to fail, but you also want to understand that it's a business and you're a product, so you have to market yourself. You have to be able to negotiate a contract, but also you have to take it as a job and write. And Steve Bruner recently shared with me that, if you could just get people to write 1 minute of material a week, hone it down to you have 1 minute per week, guess what? At the end of the year, you've got an hour set, right? Or 52 minutes. But I mean, the point is that you have to write and write and write. So Tony, I'll go to you next then. What do you know now about the business that you wish you knew when you got started?
Just that I would just get comfortable. Like, I got a week here, I get some weeks here. Like, you have to just always be steps ahead and like just like working on your act, and that's your main thing. I don't even think you have to worry that much about business, because you get to a level and you'll have people who can even do that for you if you get to that level. Like whatever agents and stuff.
Oh, right.
Because that's the worst part is just like calling. I remember that was the hard part, is calling on a phone. An old phone that wasn't on your hip, and calling and getting rejected or no. He's in a meeting. A lot of meetings. Comedy club owners. Guess
we had good screeners,
Curly Fry
right?
guy is here. We have a meeting. So yeah, it's a very proactive. You get what you put into it. These people who work always got, like, look at Lori Camin. She's 4 or 5 sets a night, has a kid, working. That's what you got to do if you want to,
Well, it's so funny because we do treat it. It is an art form. It's part of entertainment that way. But if you're going to succeed, I think you have to treat it as a job.
Oh, yeah, you have to have a plan. I mean, Patton's a really great example, and of somebody who, like, we used to open mics, or actually, I guess we were openers by then or something. Or he was, but he would, he'd be like, oh, we're going to have a party at my house, And then it was like, oh, we go to his house, and he'd be like, all right, now we're going to watch On the Waterfront. And it's like, all right, well.
Really?
No, yeah, well, because, he just wanted to, he studies film, he writes, he reads, he studies, he reads, he does. He has a plan, I don't know what his plan is, but I'm sure it's to direct eventually. And I bet you he'll do that, I mean, he's just like one of these guys. He just never stops working, and you can tell if he has new specials all the time.
Well, you've been successful.
Like Arj, too.
Well, you've been successful as a writer. And
I'm better at that than stand-up.
Well, but you were a successful stand-up comic. But, okay, even comedy writing, is there something that you understand about the industry now that you wish you'd known 20, 30 years ago?
And don't bring up the Jews.
The Jews? Or the juice. So we're talking about apple, orange?
Either one.
I mean, for writing, I think I kind of wish that that I knew that it was something to do. I kind of didn't know you could just be a writer on a TV show. I mean, I don't know that.
Well, wait. You're saying just a writer. In the group I just had, we were talking about the difference between a stand-up comic that works maybe 30 minutes a night and has all day to sit around or write or work on it, but they're working 30 minutes. When you become a writer, it's a job.
Oh,
you
no.
have to
No, I
really
say
work at it.
I wish I knew you could be one. I didn't really know you could. I didn't really think that you could go from stand-up to writing. I thought you had to go to NYU or something. I don't know. I don't know what I thought, but I didn't know that you could do that,
So if you'd had the knowledge of the industry,
I might have wanted to kind of
the
peek in
different
there a little
aspects.
bit, yeah, or study it, or I don't know, or gear myself towards that. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I didn't know that I could do that.
well, throwing it back to Arj, now Arj likes to write, but you didn't pivot into comedy writing. You stayed with stand-up, right?
Yeah, I occasionally, I got a copy of Final Cut and thought, I'll write scripts, but it just never really, I was never able to focus enough to really, I have since, co-written a movie script with a friend, but generally speaking, I've just always just wrote bits for myself because they came naturally to a certain degree, but they're not all great, like the massage one, as you saw, that come up plenty of clunkers, but I just keep trying, and those just, I don't have the greatest discipline or work ethic, so for me, stand-up bits kind of pop into my head occasionally, and then I just add them to the act.
Yeah, but you get new hours a lot. You know who made me want to do this more was Alex Reed, actually, because he would sit down and he'd write these scripts all the time in this apartment in San Francisco, and you're like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm working on a spec script." "Oh, really? What's a spec script?"
Right.
And so
or
then
treatment,
you would learn what it was, and all these things.
Alex is so sharp, and I totally respect my friends that became writers and like the discipline that they have to sit down and bash it out. And I have dabbled a little, but it's just not really. I'm too restless to sit there and write scripts.
Well, you're right, Arj. It takes a discipline, and that's what I was saying. Karen was kind of saying, "Oh, well, I became a writer like it was not like it was no big deal." To me,
yeah, it's not a cop out. It's more like
No,
you saying,
I didn't mean that though.
well, it's not easy. What I'm saying is it's a full-time job that you have to really focus on and dedicate to be successful like you, versus stand-up comedy where it's a building of a set is something that happens over time. One of the things Peter Galke, who was just here, made the point that as a writer, that once he sells something and he gets the next writing job, he's totally starting from scratch on what to write, as opposed to a comic who has an idea, then takes that idea and works it over and over and over and ends up with the gem of a joke. Whereas, and he was saying, and I wasn't aware of this, that the difference is in being a comedy writer is that soon as you sell that one project and you get a new project, you're starting with that blank piece of paper. It's not like you have a joke that you can work on over 6 months or a year.
And you have no emotional attachment. If you have an assignment type writing, you can you don't. When it's in your act, you really want to make it because you have to say it. You're looking at the people. When you're writing for somebody, you're like, oh, here's your joke you want. You know.
That's interesting because comedy, stand-up comedy, is a very personal sharing. Derive our comedy from personal experiences, and what makes stand-up comedy so fascinating for me is that everybody has a different experience. So we can all do a joke about flying in an airplane, but our experiences are all going to be different. So the jokes are all going to be different. And you're making a good point. Writing for somebody else, and you wrote for Ellen for several years, Karen. So was it a big transition writing for somebody other than yourself?
No, for me, that was like my first writing job I got.
News weasels.
News weasels, everyone. But as soon as I started being able to write for the hosts, I realized, I can do this better, So I could kind of hear their voices pretty easily, and I still can.
So you didn't find it hard? You found it easier?
I found it easy.
Was it maybe because it was disconnected from you that it was easier to write about somebody? That, to me, is fascinating.
Yeah, I just like to listen to people do comedy so much. I could kind of think of how I could write something for them all the time. I just always would think that. And anyway, with Ellen, it was kind of easy because I kind of have a similar sensibility as her. So for that long of being able to just write, and also she wanted monologues, and so monologues to me were
easier than jokes.
And then I got to get better at jokes along the way.
Interesting. Well, I would have thought that was much harder than it was for you. But again, I think it takes. You had the temperament, you had the experience that you could do that. Now, Tony, I don't know if you've ever written for somebody else, but that
Yeah, I think it's like a different thing because someone, I have VH1 and Comedy Central jobs where you're like, oh, I have to write 20 Britney Spears jokes, which I would never write for my act, but it's also easier because I just do these 20 jokes, turn them in, as opposed to, I'm not going to, what do I say that in my act? Do I say that after this? You don't have any emotional attachment.
Tony, if I could Tony's also really good in the room where he'll just be able to think of a joke really fast. Or like I literally have to, if you could give me 5 minutes just to write stuff down real fast, that is where I can do it. He can just sit there and just say the joke right there in the room, which
will eventually be bested by one of her types for like a week.
Well, Arj, have you ever done any? I mean, I assume you write for yourself, and you kind of alluded that you don't think you'd be good writing for others.
Well, occasionally I've given someone like a tag or something that they've liked it.
Well, yeah, but that's more of a community support. You haven't sat down and written 5 minutes of material for a third party, and it's because I would think it'd be difficult. They're saying it's easy.
Yeah, for me, it's not. Maybe I'm selfish, but I only ever, most of all the comedy I wrote was just in my voice for me, and it was always with the goal of having more jokes and doing better sets.
Well, Karen
was
better
as a comedian.
I think Arj's comedy is so in his head and in his universe that writing for somebody else wouldn't make much sense because they're like, "Why do I have a donkey?" And they're like, "Yeah."
Yeah, but Arj has his own thing going. I mean,
that's why I think it works for him.
Yeah. I switched over. It's like a whole other world.
I don't have a donkey.
He has to worry about his own donkeys.
It's a llama.
Yeah.
Well, but here we are with thank you, Bob, professional entertainers, and two of you find it easy to write for somebody else. And
it depends who, too, sometimes,
right. Well, Bob is Bob Worley, who's helping us with the phone.
I don't know how he does it.
But he's a good punch-up guy. He hasn't written a lot of scripts from beginning to end that I'm aware of, but he's good at looking at somebody's script and saying, "Oh, well, you can make this funnier by doing this or that."
Well, like Arj said, tags. So.
Or tags.
Yeah, but it's also punch-up on scripts. It's adding jokes.
Yeah, but there's so many facets to this art form, and that's why I love doing this podcast and reconnecting with great people like you guys. Let's bring it forward. The generations have changed. We talked about how everybody in the room is a little bit different than they were 20 years ago, as they should be. But the audiences, I think, have changed. Arj, I'll start with you. You're still performing regularly. Do you feel the audiences are different now than they were maybe in the 90s? And is that good or bad? Or
I do. I think sadly, I think for the general audience, like it's different. Like if you go somewhere and they came to see you, like you're a draw and they're your fans and they're probably going to be more focused. But I think generally speaking, people's attention spans have been affected by, phones and everything's so quick, and people don't. I don't think audiences, overall general quality of audiences is as good as it was because of the amount of stuff coming at you, information and between the internet and phones and all that. And also the TV culture, people sometimes, audiences act like they're in their living room more often. They just turn and start talking to someone, and you're on stage and you're sitting there like, excuse me, are you just talking like you're not sitting in an audience? And it's weird stuff like that just seemed to happen a lot more, almost exponentially more than it used to, in my opinion. As a comedian going around the States, and it's been a while, by the way, I haven't bloody been able to get out there for 2 years because of this. There's something going around, apparently. There's still great audiences, don't get me wrong, but I do think that people have a shorter attention span and seem to have slightly less etiquette. I think ideally one should a good comedy audience has a theater etiquette, more or less keep quiet, enjoy the show.
Right.
Keep your voice down. Yes, if there's wait service, great. That's the comedy club. I get it. That's fine. But there's a balance, and I think the balance has shifted a little more towards.
Well, I think you said it. You said it well when you said less etiquette. And I think the other word that matches what you're saying is they're impatient. They want things faster and quicker, and you worry about what would it be like with a comic like Stephen Wright or somebody that was really slow? Or even, I brought it up recently in a podcast, one of my favorite all-time comics was Larry Miller. And Larry Miller didn't do jokes per se. He would literally tell a 15, 20-minute story. You'd be laughing all the way through it, and then the payoff would be huge. But would the audience today have the patience to sit through
the 12 steps of drinking?
The 12 steps of drinking,
the 12
or his
steps of
skiing bit. I mean, they were amazing comedy bits, but you had to be somewhat patient and aware that this is going somewhere. He's taking the audience on a tour, on a trip. And I don't know if that audience has that today. Now, Tony, you're still performing. How are you finding the audiences?
Just like Arj said, people on their phones or just like not facing they're more entitled. They're in their jammies sometimes, and they're having a group feel like they have more power than the performer sometimes if there's a large group.
So maybe less respect for the entertainer.
Then there's some great clubs that still where they just have a lot of attention spans and their clubs are run well, and it reflects in good audiences that give you a little more patience and are willing to give you more listening time. Because you could go slower, build up more suspense. You don't have to I got to cut the 4 to 10 stages out of drinking because this crowd's,
I'm losing it.
Yeah, I got to cut my closer. So that just stuff like that is just general. I don't even think it's just comedy clubs. I think it's just someone's watching a video next to you at a restaurant.
And I'm not trying to pick on stand-up comedy. I think it is generational, and that back in the 80s and 90s, people, like you said, were or Arj alluded to, were a little more respectful, and they went to a comedy club. It was like theater. It
was a big night still, I think.
It was a phenomenon, though.
And now it's like, we got these free tickets. You want to go?
Karen, that's a good term. It was a phenomenon.
It was like people said, "Oh, did you know you could go to this comedy club and we could go watch a comedian?" And you're like, "What?"
And you're kind of part of the entertainment because the audience was always part of the energy and where the show went.
There's still clubs that are just like known only for that. Like you go to the Improv or the Comedy Store, or the Punchline, and then you they know what they're in for. Like when I opened up for you guys, I'd only, stand-up wise, I'd only been to like Flapper's little Yoo-Hoo room or the Improv's room next door. I wasn't really doing any stand-up, little things here and there. And I would just, screw around. Well, when I was with you two, I was realizing, oh shit, these guys paid money to come see a show. They came to see these guys,
There's a vested interest in having a good time.
They don't want me to sit there and go, so what else is up, They want me to have an act.
That's our job.
Yeah. So it was like immediately hit me that this crowd wants to see an actual show, and they did. And you guys did do a show.
So I'm going to take it one step farther with you, Karen, because as a comedy writer, do you feel that you've had to change the approach you take on writing any different from, let's say, since 2020 or 2018 till now versus the writing you might have done in the late 90s or early 2000s?
As far as
to appease or reach or engage an audience when you're as a comedy writer, did you have to adjust with the audience, or do you still write the way you did 20 years ago?
Oh, I still write the same. Yeah, I mean, I think of whatever is in the zeitgeist or whatever. I think what's going on, and how to. I go with the times. I don't write old references from the 90s.
How about that Nixon?
Yeah, I know.
Well, my Tamagotchi died today.
No, I mean, definitely you have to kind of watch. I was just working for I was working for at Sean Hayes' show, and we have a talk show hopefully, and we wanted to do this thing where Sean wanted to introduce, he wanted, when the guest came on, like it was going to be Lisa Kudrow, she's going to come on, and he wants to say, oh, how should I, it's a new show, what should I do? Maybe I offer you some Jell-O shots, how's that, And she's like, oh, I don't know about that. And he goes, and then all of a sudden he goes, I want to do I'm going to go, hi-ya, and do a karate chop to her, and then bow. And so I'm like, all right, that's weird and funny. And then everybody all of a sudden goes, wait a minute, man, we can't.
That's cultural appropriation.
We can't do that. And so, Derek Chi is one of our producers, and he goes, it's fine. It's that's what you do when you're in a karate class. You bow afterwards. It's fine. And we have to go through all the channels to make sure, is that okay to do a joke?
Where call in lawyers. And
where Sean wants to attack Lisa Kudrow, which is funny. And then eventually Sean said you could take a shot of me in the audience laughing if you feel that bad about it. But it was like, yeah, you have to think about everything you say now for the most part.
And I think that's what
Which
I
is
was
smart
trying to
too. You should be able to think about what you should have to say.
Yeah,
you
and it
shouldn't-
is about entertaining the audience, but the sensitivity to subjects has changed. For example,
so you do have to watch that when you're writing. Yeah, for sure.
Don Rickles performing today would not go over.
No, and it kind of shouldn't.
Well, it's different because at that time you thought this is kind of a cartoonish thing. I don't think he means this. These days you're like, what's the intent? And so much of comedy I see, we're like, I think he does mean it. These guys who are like shouty comics, and I was like, I don't know if they're just being silly. So I think it's better to err on the not, like to wise up, because like you said, when you first start, you want to get laughs, but after a while, you're like, I want to get laughs on my terms. I don't want to get laughs just because I'm putting on a dress and riding around on Arj's donkey.
Although that would kill.
That would kill. But you know what I mean? Like, you kind of want to make your own voice, your own terms,
Right. Well, I just think that having to adapt to the audience is important because you are there to entertain them. But at the same time, I would think entertainers like you and Arj Barker, and I was wondering if it was different for Karen as a writer, but as entertainers, as much as you want to connect with the audience, you're not willing to sacrifice your sensibility and your sense of humor.
Oh, I've done that plenty of times.
Yeah, sometimes you play Vegas and you'd be like, do a different set than you do in San Francisco. I mean, you're still happy a little bit, So that's...
Well, I think that's like a survival mechanism as a stand-up. Is like you can shift your gear, you can shift your act and make it a little more, accessible, and maybe, lean towards the hackier side of things.
Or the more easier to get jokes.
But that's the same with late night and stuff too. It's like, or talk shows. I mean, you turn on a talk show now and they're, someone's jumping on a trampoline trying to do something. It's just the dumbest shit that goes on.
Now
sometimes.
It's like games.
All the
games and stuff.
All the games. I could used to just be able to just sit and listen to like Letterman talk to somebody. That'd be fine. But also, I liked his irreverent kind of throw a TV off the building.
Right.
For no reason, or is this something? To me, that's a real game.
Right. And again, it goes to how stand-up comedy, like a lot of art, I guess the reason I'm making a point of this, and I don't mean to get too deep, but, music has changed over the decades, but the musicians are still writing what they think is going to work. And actors have a script, and so they don't really adjust to the audience because they're going to go out and do a performance, and they don't really have to connect in the same way to an audience. And going back to musicians, they're going to go out and perform a song, and when the song's done, the audience, we're just all taught you applause when it's done. Stand-up comedy is way more intimate. And it's really about engaging and bringing the audience into your world, right? Arj Barker's comedy world is different than Tony Camin's, and they bring the audience into their sense of humor and their sensibility in different ways. And I was just trying to get out of you guys, and maybe, again, it's too deep, but with the audiences changing, do you appease the audience and adjust with them, or do you stick to your sensibility of your comedy? Arj, what do you think?
Well, I think, that's a fair point, because there's some, like, if my dream audience would just sit there and they wouldn't care how long it took me or how many pauses I took to get to my humor, whatever the punchline was. And then in reality, when I'm doing a show, and this has always been the case, I've always been conscious of when I'm not getting a laugh, and I've always been trying to like cut fat in my act to get to, let's say, the reward the audience is waiting for. So I think that for me it's kind of a finding a balance between doing what I want to do, but also keeping it moving and keeping people engaged. And if anything, it's probably got a little tougher to keep the audience's attention because of the factors that are out of
we discussed
control.
Earlier, right? Tony, what about you? Go ahead.
So yeah, it's sort of a balance though. I can't just do exactly what I think's funny, I do what I think's funny, but I can't do, like, for instance, I probably have some jokes that I think are really good, but will never make it into like an important, show where I want to kill, just because they're just a little out there and I'd lose half the audience or whatever. And maybe I should do that, and maybe I would be a better comedian for it. But I save those jokes for like when I'm just messing around and doing a spot on a smaller show. But I don't know. I think there's a balance, because like at the end of the day, you're putting a product out there and you're trying to sell it, and so you have to kind of respect the marketplace a little bit and keep it balanced. Because I can't just get all hardy and lose half my audience.
Yeah, but I think you said it well. There's a balance, and I think what my podcast audience wants to know. But what about the donkey, Tony?
It's a llama.
Yeah, it's a llama. Sorry. They look so much alike. Tony, so Arj, I think, had a good explanation that he wants to stick to his sensibility of humor, but there is an obligation, as Karen said, that people have vested. They spent money. They're vested in the evening. And so engaging the audience on the audience's level is important as well. How would you address this?
Oh yeah, because there was some comics in San Francisco who would come back from Vegas and like, I hate working in Vegas, and it says, why did you accept the gig? You know, if you think, I can make these people laugh, I accept this. This is within my realm of I can tackle it, because there's you can make it. There's 80-year-olds. There's a lot of different people who have different senses of humor. So I think it's just people like complain, well, they don't get me or whatever. But it's like you have a responsibility to like, I'm taking this job as a comedian, which is by definition supposed to make the audience laugh.
Right.
But also, you don't want to sell out, or you want to stick to your voice. And I feel like bands are the same way. You look at the Beatles; they started here with the simple songs, and they went through all this crazy growth. And they're not the same band they started with. And I think a good comic will, if you see someone who's been in like Richard Pryor, all these people have been in a long time, where they start and where they end, are often Carlin's a great example. Two very different places, and they don't really lose their voice, but it might change and evolve.
No, but that's a great explanation. So thank you, Mr. Camin. Well, tell you what, let's start to wrap this up. I'm going to go back to you, Arj, and save Karen for last. But Arj, you've been very successful in Australia, but you've had a nice career here in the States. Going into for the year 2022, which is when this airs, it'll be this year. Are you working on any projects, any books, CDs, movies, TV? What's the future for Mr. Barker?
Well, it's okay probably to mention this, because by then it'll either have happened or not happened. But I'm actually branching out a little bit, something a little different from stand-up. I mean, I'm going to continue doing stand-up, and I'm continue putting out roughly a new show every couple of years out here, and hopefully tour in the States some more when I get a chance. I just haven't been able to get out there, and Tony and I love to do some weeks in the summertime. I hope we can do that. But I'm also currently right in the middle of pitching a show about UFOs and researching some famous and some lesser known UFO cases in Australia and New Zealand. And so I'm pitching that to a network. And I'll probably in a month, maybe or so, know if that got picked up or not, but it's looking okay. But I know these things can fall through, and often do. So I won't crack the champagne yet, but I will say that's what I've been working on.
But that's exciting, Arj. You're branching out. You're taking your years of experience in comedy, and you're branching out and trying some different things. And I wish you a lot of success on this show. I hope it goes.
Oh, yeah.
But we really need you back in the States, man. That's where Arj Barker needs to be.
Well, I definitely, I always still think of, I grew up in Marin County, and I still consider that home. And one day I hope to probably move back, but you never know. But life's unpredictable. But for sure, I want to come back. I miss all you guys a lot.
Well, we're looking forward to that, and let us know if the special comes out. I'm sure we'll be able to pick it up here. So, Mr.
And by the way, Scott, before I go, I just want to thank you formally, if I never have, for all this, all the stage time that you gave me, because that was a big part of my career for me, and it's an important part. So, thank you. And for all the support.
Well, thanks for saying so, and you're very welcome. And it was only because I saw the talent in you that I even offered the stage time, and I was known to be particular.
True.
What?
And I liked your barbecues too. I remember going to those barbecues at your house. They were pretty fun too.
Well, it's been mentioned a few times how cheap I am and how sometimes you didn't get paid.
Thrifty.
But I did try to treat the comics right. We tried to house them correctly, treat them right on stage. And yes, a few got invited to those personal parties. And Arj, it was our pleasure. And thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Camin, a Laughs Unlimited regular. You also kind of a regular on the Late Night with Conan O'Brien.
Once.
And... And then you had the marijuana logs.
We had the marijuana logs. Yeah. Now I didn't do much stand up during the thing. Just getting back into it. I'll be in Sacramento on New Year's Eve.
Hey, that's awesome.
That's the punchline.
So that's terrific. So the stand-up road continues to work for you.
Luckily, my wife is successful in show business, so I can just do middle for the rest of my life.
Well, I don't think you'll be middling, but so everybody keep an eye out. Tony will be on a stage near you soon. And Karen Anderson, a Laughs regular. I always think of you as part of the Laughs family and appreciated your time at the club. You've been a very successful comedy writer, worked the Ellen Show for a number of years. Then you were writing on The Talk, and then more recently on The Soup. Is that right?
I did. I just finished The Soup with Jade Catapretta, who's going to be at the Punchline this week, as a matter of fact.
And speaking of podcasts, you have your own podcast. I don't know if it's still going, but Dining with Doug and Karen?
Yeah, with Doug Benson, his old, these guys' old Marijuana Logs partner.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool.
But we haven't done it since we haven't really been doing it since the pandemic.
Okay.
We did a couple of like this.
Which is kind of funny because the pandemic is when everybody jumped into the podcast pool.
Well, ours was
Most haven't survived.
We were in restaurants doing it, or we would have people come to our studio and do it.
That's the Dining with
yeah. So we ate
Karen.
the whole time.
Oh, it was the most delicious podcast you'll ever do.
Yeah, no, everybody just couldn't believe that we get these chefs to come cook for us, but the.
I got egg slut, and that was so good.
You did. You had a good one. They're all good. We got great people. I mean, we really did.
Did you have fun podcasting?
Oh, yeah. We'll still probably do it. It's just, it's
Are you having
hard.
fun?
I'm loving this. I'm going to real quick. I'm going to bore the audience with something they've heard too many times, but you guys haven't heard. So I spent 2 years and wrote a book on my 40 plus years in the fringe of show business. And Jill took one look at it and said, no one's going to read your fucking book. Start a podcast. I'm like, what's a podcast? And it was all her idea. I got into it. I started before the pandemic. But I got to tell you, it has been such a joy to reconnect with talent like you guys, to talk about this art form that I just am passionate about. And I'm not an entertainer. I was a producer and an MC. And
you would kill sometimes, though, Scott.
Well, it was pointed out.
You
40
loved
minutes.
Keep it short. 42 minutes between the opener.
Yeah, you did love it.
You're no Ben Tony, but you're a pretty good actor.
I'll tell Randy you said that. Hey, it was pointed out that 21 years, 6-7 nights a week on stage as the MC. There, in some ways, I've had more stage time than any stand-up comic. But I never wrote material. I'm not an artist like you guys. It was always a pleasure to find you guys as talent and help you develop and present a stage for you to work and grow on. And the podcast is an extension of that. It's a opportunity to kind of relive the days that I enjoyed so much. So thank you so much for joining us. What I was leading to, Karen, is anything in 2022 that you think you'll be working on, planning on, or where can people find you?
No, I'm hoping for the Sean Hayes show. The Soup ended.
Uh-huh.
And so, it was great. It was one of the best pilots I've ever worked on, for sure. So,
and he's a nice guy, huh?
Really nice. Super funny, super nice.
No, I was trying to wrap this up, but I want you to educate me a little bit. Once you get into the TV sitcom writing, or not sitcom, but TV comedy writing, and you started and you kind of go from show to show, is that then the career is finding the next show to write for?
Yeah.
Or do you pitch ideas?
No, I mean,
or do you just get hired on your resume? I just get
hired on my resume, yeah.
Okay.
And meeting people along the way. It's the same. It's actually the same exact thing. It's how you book stand up, really.
Is that you put yourself out there and see who picks it up?
Yeah, and then you see who's doing what, and they say, "Oh, can you do this?" And then
it'll be 2 months or so, and you're like, all right. Then you look for something else.
Yeah.
But so you don't write anything, like you've never thought of writing a book, or you've never put together your own
No, I've put together
show
treatments,
ideas,
ideas.
Writing for yourself is what I meant.
Yeah, a little bit, but luckily, I've been working most of the time, so I don't really have.
You haven't had time.
I love to work for people though, so it's to me, I like that.
Well, it's been a win-win because they were lucky to have you.
Oh, isn't that nice, guys?
All right.
Do you see how I shined my buckle? That was nice.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has just been a terrific comedy roundtable with some tremendously talented artists and stand-up comics. I'd like to call friends. Sadly, these friends I haven't seen in 20 years, so the friendship might be a little thin, but
we picked up right where we left off.
Yeah,
right where we left off.
The respect for the talent hasn't changed. So for Arj Barker, Karen Anderson, and Tony Camin, thank you so much.
Worley.
And Bob Worley for being the phone guy.
You're welcome.
Bob, I think you're a partner with you.
Yeah, that was hard. I couldn't hold my arm that.
I think
feeling the burn.
I think of Bob and Arj as one now.
Yeah.
Hey, Arj, we may have found your donkey.
Thanks, Bob, for the great camera work too.
Oh, hey, man. Anything for you.
Much appreciated. Hope you're well.
All right. Same here, man. Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in this podcast. We'll be back next week with another great show. So be sure to tell a friend or rate us. And thanks again for being a regular listener. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.